Selamat datang di Kantor Urusan Hubungan Internasional Fakultas Pertanian Universitas Brawijaya atau IRO-FP. IRO-FP mengemban tugas untuk membantu pengelolaan kegiatan-kegiatan internasional di lingkungan Fakultas Pertanian dengan tetap mengacu pada ruang lingkup Tridharma perguruan tinggi, yaitu pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian masyarakat dalam perspektif global.
Pada bidang pendidikan, IRO memfasilitasi kegiatan-kegiatan internasional seperti program 3-in-1 dengan konsep pengajaran yang melibatkan dosen asing dan dosen praktisi.
It has been a pleasure to visit the Faculty of Agriculture of Universitas Brawijaya, especially for student events, and I'm also looking forward to attend more of these events in the future, but also to collaborate on research and project implementation.
Pada bidang pendidikan ini, IRO juga memfasilitasi program pertukaran mahasiswa dengan transfer kredit. Misalkan dengan Universitas Raja Manggala Thailand dan Universitas Miyazaki. Lebih lanjut, untuk program pertukaran magang dan penelitian mahasiswa secara internasional, baik inbound maupun outbound, saat ini IRO FPUB telah dan sedang memperkuat kerjasama dengan IRRI Philippines, EarthNet Thailand, Universitas Ifugao Philippines, Vietnam National University of Agriculture, FEO, Regenerative Academy Spanyol, Universitas Wageningen Belanda dan Universitas Coventry Inggris di bawah payung program Joint International Supervision.
Greetings from Michigan in the United States. I had the opportunity to visit the Faculty of Agriculture at Brawijaya University, where we were able to exchange research experiences with students and staff. I really hope that we'll be able to do so again in the near future.
Pertukaran juga dilakukan antar staf, baik sebagai penguji, peneliti, dan pengajar, misalkan dengan Universitas Wageningen Belanda. Hasil kerjasama penelitian tersebut telah banyak menghasilkan publikasi internasional yang dimuat dalam jurnal-jurnal internasional bereputasi, misalkan di Nature. Hasil kerjasama penelitian internasional tersebut juga telah diterapkan dalam bentuk pengabdian masyarakat kepada petani di Jawa Timur, yang dikoordinir oleh Fakultas Pertanian sebagai anggota dari Global Lighthouse Farm Networking dengan keunikan sistem pertanian organiknya. Kegiatan pengabdian internasional ini telah dipublikasikan pada koran, majalah, dan situs-situs internet di Eropa. Kedepannya, di IRO-FP masih terus meningkatkan kegiatan-kegiatan internasional yang strategis. Salah satunya Joint Supervision yang dapat menjadi penggerak internasionalisasi di bidang pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian masyarakat.
Greetings from Wageningen, the Netherlands. Together with colleagues, I visited the Faculty of Agriculture of the University of Brawijaya last year. It was great to meet the complex rice system farmers in East Java and to share research experience with students and staff of the University of Brawijaya. We look forward to strengthen our collaboration between Brawijaya and the global network of lighthouse farms.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to International Webinar in Agroecological Foodscape Transformation, Science, Practice, Sovereignty, and Social Justice on November 16, 2020. My name is Jani Islami, and I'm the Master Ceremony of today's International Webinar. Firstly, let's be grateful to God. Because of His blessing, we can attend to this webinar in healthy conditions. It's an honor for me to welcome to our Honorable Vice Deans of Academic Faculty of Agriculture, Brawijaya University, Malang, Indonesia, Dr. Sujaro, SPMP. Our Honorable keynote speakers, Professor Miguel Altieri from Berkeley University of California, USA, Professor Paolo Barberi from SSSA, Pisa, Italy Agroecology Europe, Dr. George Felix from Center of Agroecology, Water and Resilient, Coventry, University, UK, and Dr. Humaera from Faculty of Agriculture, Brawijaya University, Malang, Indonesia. I will also greet all the participants today's webinars international. This webinar to bring together all academia, researchers, and experts. We will share not only knowledges, but also remarkable global experiences in implementing agroecological foodscape transformations in developed and developing countries such as USA, Europe, UK, and also Indonesia. This webinar also provides a really great opportunity to enrich you with the positive and also wider perspective in the developments and also the recent topics happening in agroecological foodscape transformations. This webinar is joined by more than 200 participants from various institutions and countries, and it will keep increasing during the webinars. And the participants are mostly students, lecturers, and also researchers. Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we have several agendas for today's webinar as follows. The first one is the opening speech from the Vice Dean of Faculty of Agriculture, Brawijaya University, Malang, Indonesia. And then for the presentations, it will divide into two sessions. For the first sessions, we will hear the presentation from Dr. Humaera and then Dr. George Felix. And for the second sessions, we will hear the presentation from Professor Paolo Barberi and also Professor Miguel Altieri. We also will have questions and also answer sessions after each sessions. And all the presentation sessions will be handled by our Honorable Moderator, Dr. Hagus Tarno, SPMP. And then after that, we come to the closing of the webinar today. And then well, to take the advantage of time, let's start our first agenda. We are now going to listen to the opening speech by the Vice Dean of Agriculture, Faculty of Agriculture, Brawijaya University, Malang, Indonesia, Dr. Sujarwo, SPMP. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Sujarwo.
Good evening for participants from Indonesia, and I think this the special event. I think because usually we conduct international seminar in the morning, but right now in the evening, and especially for our honorable guest lecturer, honorable speaker, Prof. Miguel Altieri from University of California, Berkeley. Professor Paolo Barberi from Pisa Agroecology, Europe, Dr. George Felix from Center for Agroecology, Water and Resilience, Coventry University, UK, and also Dr. Humaera from University of Brawijaya. It is really great event conducting in the evening for us, sharing about agroecology perspective, concerns internationally, and also I think it is really important topic because right now it's kind of trade-off between what is the profit and what is the ecology side. So having deeper understanding, international perspective from Prof. Altieri, Prof. Paolo Barberi, and Josh Felix, and also the experiences from Bu Uma, I think will give us a deeper understanding about what is the optimum one in understanding between the trade-off of agroecology and the seeking the profit for economic side. So we also send a warm greeting to all our participants in the evening, and also our honorable guest speaker from our deans, because of the other agenda has to be conducted by our dean. So without overdue, for conducting this international seminar, I think with Bismillah, we open the international seminar of toward agroecological food state transformations, science, practice, sovereignty, and social justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sujarwo, for the opening speech. Now we will step to the main agenda. We will start the presentation of the international webinar. But before we start, I would like to give you a brief information about our moderator today, Dr. Hagus Tarno, SPMP. Okay, Dr. Hagus Tarno, SPMP, was born in Malang, August 10, 1977. He is the Vice Dean of the Student Affairs in Faculty of Agriculture, Brawijaya University, Malang, Indonesia. He graduated from Kyoto University for PhD degree in 2011. He has a really amazing record of publication, scientific meetings, extension service, and also he becomes the member of some organizations, namely Entomological Society of America since August 2012 until now, International Union of Forest Research Organization since 2010 until now, Japanese Forest Society from 2009 until 2011. But before we start the webinar, I will invite you to do the photo sessions together. So I will invite all the participants to turn on the camera so we can take a photo together. Okay, we will take a picture. Okay, we will take another picture. One more picture. Okay. And this is the last picture. Thank you so much for all the participants. And then now we come to the main agenda of today's international webinar, the presentation sessions. As what I said previously, that the presentation sessions will be handled by our honorable moderator, Dr. Hagus Tarno, SPMP. So I will give the opportunity to Mr. Hagus Tarno. So Mr. Hagus Tarno, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Master of Ceremony. This was time for me to be moderator for international
ladies and gentlemen, and all the participants.
Okay.
Mr. Tarno is ready for the presentation, so I will give the chance once again to Mr. Hagus Tarno, our moderator today.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, audience and presenter, we have little bit difficulties about microphones, maybe because of my computer it's so old, but it's okay. I try to use another computer. Okay, I think it's better for us to share the curriculum vitae for two presenters for the first sessions, I think. Okay. Okay, for the first session, it will be two presenters. The first one is Dr. George Felix. He is belong to the Center for Agroecology, Water and Resilience from University of Coventry University, United Kingdom. And as we can see here, there are several information about him. The first one, he is a native from the Puerto Rico. He is a part of USA. And also, when I check it here, he is have a French root as well. And he studied biology in Paris and agronomy in Bordeaux and Montpellier, and also completed his PhD in farming system ecology at Wageningen University. And he also now is assistant professor in Coventry University, UK, and also the lecturer at the University of Puerto Rico, and sometimes he also give a lecture in Wageningen University, and also ISARA in France. And he has also facilitated the learning process on agroecology with the farmers in Puerto Rico and also in West Africa. In these facilitations, he support for several projects, especially several institute in United Nations. The first one is FAO, and the second one is UNDP, and also Global Environment Facility. He is now member of SOCLA, is the Latin America Agroecology Society. Okay, there are several information about him. It's difficult for me to explain all, but the most important one is he can speak English and also Spanish, French, Portugal, and also Italia. Okay, so maybe if all of us have several skill, it's not only in English, maybe we can also use French and Portugal and also Italy. Okay, this is the information about Dr. George Felix. Welcome, Dr. Felix. And the second one, I will inform about Dr. Khumairoh. Dr. Khumairoh also she is belong to the Brawijaya University and have a field study focused on organic farming and farming system ecology. And she studied the master and PhD in Wageningen University. And now she is a lecturer of organic plant productions, management of agroecosystem, sustainable agriculture, and several subjects in University of Brawijaya. Her research focus on the alternative farming system, complex agroecosystem, biocultural diversity, traditional farming, and farmer community development, with the participatory learning and on-farm experimental approaches. Now, he is also the head of international office in Faculty of Agriculture, University of Brawijaya. And before join in Brawijaya University, she worked for national and international NGOs in developing organic and sustainable agriculture. Okay, that's all for Dr. Uma. And we continue to give time to Dr. George Felix. So please prepare for presentation for Dr. Felix. And time is yours, Dr. Felix, please.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Can you see my screen?
It's not yet.
Not yet. Now, yes. Yeah?
Okay, please. It's good.
Ah, great. Okay. Well, good morning. My name is George Felix. I am from Puerto Rico in the Caribbean, the other side of the world. I have been recently appointed as assistant professor, researcher at the Center of Agroecology, Water and Resilience in the United Kingdom. And I focus my research on, very similar to UMA, on complex systems, no? The design of complex agroecological systems. But I work in a different context, of course, and that's what I want to share briefly this morning, or this afternoon for you, this evening. I only have a few slides that I want to share that I think are super important to understand when we speak about transition to agroecology. That's the title of the conference, right? Towards agroecological food systems. We have to understand that there are pathways or steps, if you want, of how to achieve this agroecological food system. They are very simple to speak, they are very difficult to implement. The first one is when you are on a farm that is conventional, that uses agrochemicals or does not use much diversity, then what you want to do is increase the efficiency of these conventional practices. Instead of using, for example, herbicide on a rainy day, it washes off, then you would like to use that same product on a dry day, so that the product itself, even though it's toxic, it can be efficient in that sense. The next level is when we speak about organic certification. And you know that sometimes organic does not mean necessarily agroecological. It just means that we are substituting the toxic chemicals by more natural chemicals. For example, instead of using herbicide, you can use maybe vinegar, which is not toxic for health. That's the second level. Then the third level that I enjoy a lot, and that's where I think Uma and myself thrive or like to operate, is in the redesign of these production systems. How do you look for diversification, reconfiguration, and using nature to intensify the processes that are occurring on the farm? Yeah. Now, when this is at the farm level, right? You increase the efficiency, you detoxify all the processes, and then you redesign your production systems. If you want, we need to upscale all of this into agroecological food systems themselves, which are really, we haven't found any agroecological food system at a nationwide level in the world. You would need to shift the paradigms, say, to implement policies, politics, and processes that are coherent with healthy food systems. Yeah. Now, we speak also a lot about agroecology, and I wanted to share what are the principles of agroecology. I think during my classes with you, with the groups that Uma facilitated, I showed this slide, but the most important thing here is that agroecology first is a complex science itself. It's a complex discipline that takes out from biology and ecology, takes from anthropology, and takes from systems thinking. So it's very complex, and we try to focus the area of study in the farm. And we follow some of the principles of design, no? Diversity, efficiency, synergy, recycling, and interactions. And all of these are principles that are guided by specific farming practices. For example, today I will talk a little bit about coffee, while Uma will speak about complex rice systems. And while the farming practices are different or specific to each context, the principles remain valid and universal. So this is where I am at the moment, Puerto Rico, right here. It's in the Caribbean. You can see here is Florida in the US, Cuba, Central America. You can see a little bit of Brazil, and I am based right here in Puerto Rico in the middle of the Caribbean. And what's particular here is that each island is unique, of course. They have each particular language, but we also have, if you see this graph, we have a lot of extreme climate events that go from drought to flooding to hurricanes, cyclones, storms, etc. And that is a particularity of our region, is that we are often confronted to these extreme climate events. Okay, one of the crops that we most cultivate in the mountains is coffee. Do you have coffee in Indonesia? I think yes. It's Coffea robusta. Here in the Caribbean, we mostly grow Arabica. It's a little bit more has a little bit of more flavor. Normally, farmers in Puerto Rico, and historically, they have farmed coffee without shade, and that is incongruent with the nature of the plant, which requires shade. And you can see the difference between these two pictures. You can almost sense the temperature, no? It's very warm where there are no trees. It's very fresh where there are trees. And these trees promote recycling, they promote interactions, they provide habitat for birds and lizards and small animals that will help you in controlling, for example, pests. If you're applying chemicals in this type of farms with trees, you are also destroying the possibilities of wildlife to live there. So what you want to do is reduce and completely eliminate the use of agrochemicals, and instead use the benefits of trees to provide shade, provide habitat, and provide these interactions. Also, you can see that there are several crops. Maybe it's not that clear, but here on the plot, on the picture to the right, to the left, I'm sorry, you have coffee, but you also have banana. And this is an important aspect of this type of farming, is that you have diversification, you have crop associations, and we select crops and organize them on the plot in order to have more produce per land. And I think this is also very important because we are not only producing food for the market, we are also producing food for the house. And I think sometimes that aspect is not fully taken into account. And often people say that organic or agroecology is not as productive, but it is. It's just it's productive in another way. It's not only money. It's also well-being. It's also wildlife and social networks. Show you another image. So that previous photo was in Puerto Rico. Now I take you to Costa Rica, where you have a conventional farm that also has trees, but they are managed in a way that seems as if there were no trees. Still, there are some interactions here, and this tree here that in the middle that maybe it's not so clear is pruned, no? It's cut, and then all these branches are allowed to grow, and they are cut again. So that's another system with trees as well, but very different from fully grown agroforest. You see, with the coffee and the big trees, you can see that the temperature is different, the color of the plants is different. They seem more relaxed and not so stressed. And you can also notice on the ground that the picture to the left, they are using herbicides, so there is no green on the ground. And on the picture to the right, the farmers are selecting the weeds that they will allow to grow. No, they don't allow all the weeds, but they allow some that are helpful in managing this system. And these are some of the elements that I wanted to share, and I hope are useful for you in terms of understanding the principles of agroecology. Yeah? My time is up, right? Okay. One last, I cannot hear anybody. Okay. So the last image that I wanted to share with you, just if you give me one more minute, is the integration, no? Thinking further, I spoke about reconfiguration and redesign of these farming systems, and I wanted to share this experience from a farmer in Costa Rica, in Central America, where not only they had coffee and bananas, they also had goats, and the manure from these goats would directly fertilize the coffee, and also all the weeding, all the leaves, branches that were cut were fed directly to the animals that were already on the farm. So I think that was an interesting reconfiguration and just food for thought for you to be creative and rethink. Like, do not be shy in being creative and proposing radical ideas in order to obtain the most benefits from the farms. So I finish here. Thank you very much for having me today, and I hope you have a lovely session with all the professors.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Felix. Great presentation and also good topic, I think. Then next we will move to Dr. Uma. It's time for you, Dr. Uma, please.
Thank you, Pak Hagus. I will try to share my screen.
There's a lot of echo.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, Uma, but there is a lot of echo.
Yeah, I'm menggaung. Yeah. Yeah, we cannot do anything, but I think now it's better.
Better.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
clear now. Please continue, Dr. Uma, please.
Wait. Okay, thank you, Pak Hagus. To Vice Dean, colleague, participants, to George, Prof. Paolo, Prof. Miguel, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share our work on redesigning Indonesian farming system with agroecology. So there are many reasons why we should redesign current farming system. From the global perspective, we already know that the biodiversity loss and biogeochemical flow of nitrogen and phosphorus have exceeded our planetary boundaries, while climate change and land system are at high risk. And then agriculture is a significant contributor to these planetary boundaries. Therefore, radical changes in farming system are required to maintain a conducive life for human development and well-being. And from Indonesian perspective, it is relevant to associate the redesigning action to solve nutrition problem and to increase resilience against market and climate change. With a green revolution that promotes agrochemical, has already killed everything in the very rich biodiversity of traditional rice systems. And yeah, the rice yield become high and produce more carbohydrate, but lack of protein, vitamin, and other essential nutrition. This makes significant problems of stunting and vitamin deficiency in Indonesia. Furthermore, current systems are also very vulnerable to global market changes. For example, between 1997 to 1999, during the Indonesian monetary crisis, rice productivity and availability dropped drastically because of lower purchasing power of farmers on agrochemicals, because pesticide materials were imported from abroad. And then again in 2010 and 2013, rice yield would drop, this time due to prolonged heavy rainfall that make agrochemicals use was inefficient, and farmers respond to this inefficiency by increasing the dosage that even made it worse, because pests become resistant to pesticides and leading to pest outbreak and secondary pest resurgence. And so with this all problem, with this current situation, redesigning farming system is required. And we start in Indonesia because rice is very important commodity, then we start with rice system. We did research, observation, and experiment on 4 districts of East Java for 5 rice cropping cycle involving many researchers and students from Asia, Europe, and America. And the research goal was to improve current farming system resilience against climate and market changes, and also nutrition problem. And then we identified from traditional farming that several species could provide services on nutrient cycling, pest and weed suppression, while also producing nutritious food. We found fish, azolla, ducks, and border plants are good candidates, and they, together with rice, we call the system as complex rice system. And this is the interaction between duck, fish, azolla in rice complex system, in complex rice system. First, growing rice attract pests and weeds, and in complex rice system, these pests and weeds are eaten by fish and ducks through their feeding and movement behavior. And then azolla also cover water and soil to prevent weed emergence. And then with the ability of azolla to fix nitrogen from the air, and also because they are fast growing, then azolla also can be used as feed and for fish and duck. And then adding border plants can invite and safeguard natural enemies to add plant protection strategies in this rice ecosystem. And some border plants can be used as feed for ducks and fish or as green manure. And this feeding followed by duck and fish excretion processes enhance nutrient cycling, provided sufficient nutrients for rice. And therefore, rice yield in my experiment improved with increasing level of complexity, and the highest yield was obtained under the most complex system. But then in the long-term experiment, we found that crop yield under conventional system are only reliable during good condition. This is in blue dot here, while the organic in the brown one, yeah, they are stable, but the yield remain low. And the yellow one is the complex rice system. The yield were stable across location over many cropping cycle with high yield also due to more robust and flexible mechanism of pest and weed suppression, and also have a quick nutrient recycling. And complex rice system also offer benefits on food and income diversity from duck meat, fish, egg, and vegetables. This resulting in higher nutritional yield. We can see here the white one is monoculture, always having the lowest nutritional yield, and even for vitamin and sodium are absent in monoculture, while in complex rice system they are the highest. And yeah, despite the large long-term benefit that offered by complex rice system, the implementation on community level is challenging and site-specific, which needs step-by-step approaches. Then we develop the method by organizing participatory learning that allows knowledge flows from all directions using DEED learning style, consisted of describe, explain, explore, and design steps. The feedback to the design was generated to be implemented in the next cycle. Therefore, improvement can be continuously made. And during the describe step, knowledge flows from farmers to researchers were on the local context of farming system. We collected data through in-depth interviews to describe current situation, included farming context, biophysical and social, economical and cultural aspect. And then we validated the data in an FGD with a question similar to those in in-depth interviews. And then the validated data serve as baseline data. Then we continue with explain step here to deepen understanding on the local context by exploring the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and constraints in participatory with workshop method. And then the third step, based on the weaknesses, we rank the constraint. This was done participatorily in participatory with farmers. And then some option also identified based on indigenous knowledge of farmers. And the researcher also give feedback while also introducing the concept of functional diversity of azolla, fish, duck, and border plants. Then we also plan the redesigning was agreed with all participants for the participatory on-farm experiment. Here the participatory on-farm experiment the observation and measurement were done together with farmers on a regular basis. And then by the end of design step, feedback were generated from farmers as a learning process path to improve the following DEED cycle. It was concluded that different conditions could adopt or start with different elements. For example, here, with a great problem for weeds and pests in Malang, farmers agreed that integration of duck should be prioritized than other elements. And then in Pasuruan, because they grow rice 3 times per year, so they have to maintain soil fertility by integrating azolla and sunham as a green manure. And in Blitar, because azolla and vegetables very potential to be developed there, then they said that it will be better to start with vegetable and azolla surrounding rice. And finally, for Lamongan, with soil condition that trap water and very wide rice band construction, fish and border plants were excellent to start. And then we can conclude from our experiment that fine-tuning management of selected biodiversity provides flexible mechanism to control weeds and pests in any weather condition and providing sufficient nutrient for all elements to be recycled internally. Thus, the system are more resilient across a variety of environments and climate variabilities. And then the underlying mechanism of weed and pest suppression on nutrition cycling in complex rice system involve animal feeding and movement behavior and feeding and excretion processes. And then the higher nutrient uptake by rice plant, this lead to better rice yield. And redesigning current system with functional diversity for agroecology could improve income diversity while solving nutrition problems because they produce diverse food. And considering a great diversity of environment, DEED learning style could facilitate participatory learning for redesigning farming system to build resilience landscape for climate, food, and nutrition security and sovereignty. So I think that's all from my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Uma. In this session, Dr. Uma is the last presenter here. So now we will move to the discussions. So if there are any questions, so please raise your, sorry, I don't know, maybe there are some menu related to the question and answer. Is there any raise your hand or others? If not, maybe it's better for all of you can just type in the chat. Then we will try to inform your questions, and we will try to give information to each presenter. It will be better. So, okay, let's start to open the question and answer. So, who will be the first? Will be the first person that have questions? Pak Jarwo, maybe.
Thank you, Marcus. Yes, I have. This is interesting topic, I think. But usually, as we know, that usually farmers is really, have a, is not patient enough to, to adopt such a, complex system. Usually, the farmers in Indonesia just wanna produce rice and spray the insecticide and getting down all the pests and disease, and then waiting for the harvest time. So, Bu Uma, do you have some experiences related to the developing awareness to the farmers in adopting such a agroecological method in their production? And do you think that they will be sustained in their way if you just leave them? I mean, you do not accompany them, and do you think that they will conduct such a technology or approach? And for Dr. Felix, do you have the what is the market in Puerto Rico? Do you think that my question is related to the market? Does the market support the product from the agriculture that pay enough attention in agroecology? I think that's a question, Pak Hagus. Thank you.
Go ahead, Uma.
Huh? Me? Okay. Sorry. The voice of Pak Agus quite soft. Yeah, I think it's almost impossible, Pak Jarwo, to leave farmers without guidance this moment. Yeah, because the development of agroecology and organic farming, it's very slow in Indonesia, and even once we have farmer field school in the same area. In my side, it was organic, and next to our side, it was the farmer field school also, but they provide pesticides. It was conducted by local Ministry of Agriculture in collaboration with a pesticide company. And we could not provide sufficient incentive. So many farmers follow the left side because of this money thing. So this also similar to the development of this complex rice system. The idea is great, but if it cannot generate more income, then they will leave it. That's why many scientists, they propose to have border plants as flowers, and it could not be sold. And then farmers just leave it. It's nice to see, but they see there's no advantage of using this flower. That's why we use vegetable instead of flower on the rice ban. And then the market also need to be created here. That's why in our approach in workshop, we also invited a potential marketer or trader there. It can be local or established one, but the economic indeed must be prioritized to start with, because our farmers now, they are still lack of knowledge on agroecology, because the long period of Green Revolution, it was enforced even by military to force farmers to adopt this to adopt a conventional system. So yeah, we cannot just immediately expect that farmers will adopt it, but we can do step-by-step approach. That's my answer for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Uma. Okay, the next question, it will be answered by Dr. Felix. Please, Dr. Felix.
Yes, thank you for that question. Yeah, so in terms of market, you first have to understand that in Puerto Rico, there is not so much agriculture, and the transformation from a very agricultural economy towards a more industrial economy shifted the landscape. No, there used to be more or less 1% of forest. Today, forest cover represents more than 80%, yeah, of the total land. So that's quite a shift. Now, in terms of agriculture, like I said, this is important to know the history, because the mainstream agriculture here is conventional, no, with herbicides and agrochemicals, and of course oriented towards market and commercial purposes. What is happening is that because the markets are conventional and they ask for certain, let's say, quality or size or variety, yeah, what has happened in the last 15 years, there have been new organic markets, consumer-driven organic markets, people that are looking for different produce that are locally produced and also without any pesticides. And that includes diversity. So all of this diversity, for instance, what you mentioned, Uma, the flower strips could be translated into some form of economic entry if transformed. They would not possibly be sold as such, but they can be transformed. One way of transforming the flower strips is, for example, by the use of bees or using these flowers in medicinal teas and putting some extra work into, you know, having a new product. Now, this is not a reality for everybody, of course. Not everybody has the time or the knowledge to do that, and I think that's important to recognize. And what has happened in Puerto Rico with the agroecological farmers markets is that you have the social movements are building from there. So many of the initiatives that are happening on the farm often start at these markets, where there are communications, interactions between people, starting to collaborate for one reason or another, not necessarily linked to farming. And I think also it's very utopic for me to say, no, but I think we need to really reshift a little bit the relations that we have with each other, not also with the land in terms of not putting so much chemicals in general, but also with the people in terms of constructing positive links. And I think those two things combined will drive new markets, or will drive new products for farmers to live on. It's very case specific. Possibly in Indonesia and Puerto Rico, we have many common issues, and also many things that are not similar at all, that are very different. And that's why it's important, like you said, yeah, to accompany, you know, the farmers for a while. If you go to Cuba, for instance, also in the Caribbean, the Cubans have developed a methodology, or have excelled. They didn't create it. It was created in Central America, in Guatemala, by indigenous communities. But in Cuba, it was excelled, the peasant-to-peasant methodology. You know? So it's a kind of farmer field school where the extensionist or the technical agent is one more person in the horizontal network of sharing knowledges. No? So each farmer has their things to produce and to communicate, and that they want to share and also learn from each other, but as peers, not as a hierarchy of where you have an extensionist agent or government or whatever the structure we have, and or NGO, right? And the farmer as a receiver. No, this is a method of horizontally putting all the information together and progressing together. I think that's what Uma showed. And if worked well, you don't even need the extensionist after a while. The idea is that the technical agent catalyzes something in the community and then can go to the next community, so to speak, you know? And in those interactions, again, that's where you will create the well-being, the general well-being of the community, of the persons, the farmers involved in the food production system, but also you will create opportunities for new products, new markets, maybe new consumers, not necessarily exporting, but maybe new consumers, like exchanging. So we have to rethink a bit this economy. And it's not there's no short answer, no, there's no quick answer to this. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Felix and Dr. Uma. But we found there are several questions for both of you. The first one, I will try to inform you about one question from Dian Catur Prayantini. She asked to all of you about, can we adopt this complex system for pit and marginal lands? And I'm wondering that if can be adopted in this land, it would be better to increase the land productivity. And she mentioned that please kindly give us your opinions for both all of you. So it's better for Dr. Felix, maybe?
Yeah.
Is it possible to adopt complex system in pit land or marginal land?
Yeah, definitely. The only thing is that you need, when we think in agroecological terms, no, as an agroecologist from a, let's say, science or practice perspective, you have two elements. One is plant health, no, crop health, and the other element that is super important and often neglected by conventional farming is soil quality. Yeah. So when you want to implement complex systems in lands that are marginal or maybe degraded, no, you have to go stepwise. Again, you have to first improve the soil quality by adding organic materials, by planting seeds that are that have very fibrous roots and that can break down the soil for you. In some cases where you have contamination, you might want to plant to work on the decontamination, the decontamination of the plot itself. You know, if you have heavy metals or something, so you have to go stepwise, and the first stepping stone is the soil quality. You improve the soil quality, and then you ensure to have adapted varieties or plants that can grow in that area where you are. No, considering temperature, considering the type of soil that you have, considering the rainfall that you receive, and the specifics of that complex system are unique to the place where our location, you know, specific. But the principle is universal. Like I said, soil quality, you improve the diversity, and then you can rethink this how to make these systems very, very complex. In the tropics, it's easier than in temperate areas, I would say. We are in tropical areas. We have a lot of species. They grow year round, and it's very easy for us, or easier, let's say, to develop complex systems that are also productive.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Felix. Good questions, I think. I agree with that. But one more from Dr. Uma. It's better for you to give a short answer.
Yeah, I think I also agree with George's. Yeah, it's very possible because there are many opportunities for the biodiversity, to be put in any system. And the most important here is we have to respect a local perspective there. So the first step, we need to understand what are appropriate plant or commodities on that area. Yeah, and also considering community there, and yeah, as George said, that site specific must be emphasis there here. So yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Uma. One more question from Professor Paolo, especially for Uma. He mentioned about that. Are there any institutional plans from Indonesian governments or regional government to support organic or agroecological farming, or at least to reduce fertilizer or pesticide use? So please give your opinions related to that.
Thank you, Prof. Paolo. I think Pak Hagus know better about this, and also Pak Sudjarwo, because they are closer to government than myself. In my opinion, I have one colleague working in the Ministry of Agriculture in the division of sustainable agriculture. She also joined my project before, but it's also not easy. But I do not know if Pak Hagus or Pak Sudjarwo know if there is the plan from a government.
Yeah, I think in this discussion, there are several scientists from plant and diseases, and also I'm also belong to the plant protection department. We have experience related to the IPM activity start from 1989, and one expert from our department is Pak Gadot. Dr. Gadot is very, I think he is the most excellent scientist on IPM, I think. He can give much more information about this case, about the farmer pit school, etc., etc. But I don't know precise about the government situation right now. But I think there are several activities provided by government that focus on how to reduce the pesticide use and also fertilizer use. And we did several activities. However, it's not so huge. We just do in small plot and several area. And I did also several activities. I think you also joined with me at the time, and we have a small project together with USAID. However, it's not in Indonesia, but in another country.
Yeah, in
and that one also conducted in Indonesia. Actually, start from 1989. Okay, I think we can have a discussion in depth, focus on how to reduce pesticide and fertilizer use, but maybe in the next session, right?
Okay.
Next session. Yeah, one more question from Pak Muhammad Ghazi. He mentioned about first, where is the biggest marketplace for us to sell our product besides supermarket and traditional markets, especially related to your products, because Dr. Uma produce, I think, close to be the organic product, right? And also Dr. Felix also tried to produce the same one. So is there any marketplace for such kind of organic product in Indonesia or in Puerto Rico?
Who first? George?
Okay.
Okay, just okay, please.
So, biggest market for organic products in Puerto Rico, it's a bit limited. We are more buyers than sellers, but usually people from other islands from the Caribbean sell either to the United States organic markets or to the European markets. Those are the two mainstream, let's say. Other than that, it's the local markets, and sometimes you have supermarkets that buy local produce in the mountains here in Puerto Rico, but it's not mainstream really. We are not exporting
organic.
Organic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think here also, yeah, based on my experience so far, even I have a lot of demand on this organic, but we could not provide products. It's very limited the production because I only have a very little piece of land. And with this COVID, actually, there are more opportunities to sell local, like to the neighbors. They come directly to my farms, sell, buy on the farm, and even they pick the fruit by themselves. And sometimes they ask chicken to be slaughtered directly. So that's for the market. There are many opportunities for organic.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Uma and Dr. Felix. It's time, I think, to close our session. But before that, I just try to make such kind of brief conclusions about this our session, like our first sessions. I think both of you mentioned that redesign, it will be better to increase the productivity of our agro-ecosystem. As you mentioned, that by designing agro-ecosystem based on a landscape aspect and then a system and also the people, and we try to use the principle of agroecology by focus on the diversity and efficiency and synergy and also recycling. And one more, if we focus on interaction between each component in agroecosystem, it can create the good and sustainable agro ecosystem. And finally, maybe we can try to reduce such kind of synthetic inputs such as fertilizer, herbicide, and insecticide, fungicide, and any other of input that produced by company. And also Dr. Uma mentioned that biodiversity will be the most important thing that can contribute to control such as the weed and then a pest and providing sufficient nutrient and others. And we believe that by redesigning of agro-ecosystem, we can create a more sustainable ecosystem, agro-ecosystem, I think that's all for brief conclusion in these sessions, and I will give back the time to the MC. Okay, please. Thank you, Dr. Uma and Dr. Felix.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hagus Tarno, for the first session. So thank you also for all the presenters for the first session for the amazing presentations. Now, before we start the second sessions, I just want to remind all the participants to fill out the attendance list that we have sent in the chat column. And then we prepare for the second sessions. So for the second sessions, we will have the presentation from Professor Paolo Barberi and also Professor Miguel Altieri. So for the times and opportunity, I will give back to the moderator, Mr. Hagus Tarno. Time is yours.
Okay. Thank you, MC. Okay, the first one I want to inform brief curriculum vitae for both professors right now. The first one is Professor Paolo Barberi. Professor Paolo Barberi, he is professor in agronomy at Institute of Life Sciences, San Anna School of Advanced Studies, Pisa, Italy, and he lead agroecology research group and has coordinated the international PhD program in agro biodiversity since 2019. Now his research focus on functional agrobiodiversity with the main topic including optimizing of organic and low input cropping system, though the use of functional agrobiodiversity at genetic species and or habitat levels. And the second, the selection and or combinations on the trade related to the provision of agro-ecosystem services. And the third, group biodiversity mediated trophic interactions. And the last one is with ecology and management in organic and low input system. He has contributed to the more than 330 papers, and he collaborated with the FAO, European Commission, and European Food Safety Authority, and Italian Ministry of Agricultural, Food and Forestry Policies. And he has been scientific secretary and vice president, president and past president of European Wheat Research Society, 2002 to 2015. And he also co-founder and currently serves as the vice president of Agroecology Europe and co-founder and present board member of Italian Association of Agroecology. Was great curriculum vitae, and I tried to inform one more curriculum vitae for the second presenter. The second presenter is Professor Miguel Altieri. He belongs to University of California, USA. He studied agronomy at the University of Chile, and where he received a bachelor's degree, and he graduated his PhD in entomology at the University of Florida. In 1980s, become professor of agroecology at the University of California. And he has conducted most of his research in California and Chile. And he is working closely with the farmers and workers to implement principle of integrated pest management, intercropping, cover crop, cover field border vegetation manipulation, and other sustainable practice of biological control. And Professor Altieri also served as a scientific advisor to Latin American Consortium on Agroecology and Development, Chile, an NGO network promoting agroecology as strategy for small farm sustainable development in regions. And he also served for 4 years as general coordinator for United Nations development programs for sustainable agriculture networking and extension program. And he was chairman of the NGO committee of consultative group of international agricultural research. And he was director of US-Brazil Consortium on Agroecology and Sustainable Rural Development. And he also advisor to the FAO, globally important agricultural heritage systems, and which is devoted at identifying and dynamically conserving the rational farming system in developing world. And now he is a president of the Latin America Scientific Society of Agroecology. In 2012, he supported farming the geotract at a UC-owned part of land. In 2017, he became honorary professor of the University of La Frontera. That's all. It's great curriculum vitae for both professors. Okay, the first opportunity I will give time to Professor Paolo Barberi. Okay. Okay, and please, time is yours, Professor.
So, hello everyone. So it's really nice. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Clear, bro.
Okay, very good. So, and I hope you're also able to see my presentation on the screen. If not, just please tell me. So it's a great pleasure, an honor to be there with you and to share some thoughts. And especially that's actually the topic of my talk. I want to give you a brief overview of what's going on in Europe, specifically in the European Union, which, as you probably know, includes 27 European countries, and it's very important from the point of view of also policy and research. Because these are exciting times for agroecology and for sustainable agriculture in our continent, so I wanted to share some views. Explain a bit what's going on, what are the challenges as well as the opportunities we are facing. And I will also give you 3 examples of agroecological initiatives from my own country. And I will use this also to illustrate the opportunities that we have also in Italy to develop agroecology. So I will start by, let me see if I can, yeah. Okay, so I deleted the title because I want to focus on this picture that I've used in the background of my title slide. This is a piece of typical hillscape territory in the central part of my country. Consider that Italy, for 75% of the land, has mountains and hills. So the plains are only 25%, 1/4 of the total territory. And in this piece of landscape, you see a central road here, which is basically dividing two very different worlds. On the right side of this road, so this part here, you see an agroecological farm, which is very diverse. So you can guess it from the colors of the land. So there is vegetable area where vegetables are grown. There are cereals. So these are areas for pasture. Then there are animals, different species of animals, which are reared on the farm. There is woodland, which is also used for honey production. It's really a diverse and productive farm. And it is also very well advanced from the point of view of environmental sustainability. So, for example, they have solar panels for drying the hay that they feed the animals with. So it's quite diverse. You can guess it from the landscape. It is very productive. It is more than 200 hectares. It's in the form of a cooperative. I think this is an important issue because through cooperation between nearby farmers, and I will give you some additional examples later, I think we can really push agroecology forward everywhere. There are some clear success cases in Europe and in Italy, but I think this is a general concept that is valid everywhere. On the opposite side, you see an area of the same territory, so no differences from the point of view of landscape, from the point of view of topography, or from the point of view of climate. But you see also from the color there is a very different situation. Actually, it's another farm of about 200 hectares. But as you can guess from the grayish color of this land here, these are abandoned farmland. What was the reason that drove this farmer to abandon his land from agricultural production? So this farmer was a conventional farmer, very much engaged into the production of durum wheat, which is the type of wheat by which we make pasta. So it's a very popular crop in my country. And durum wheat, like many commodities, is successful or not from the point of view of the economy of the farm, depending not on how good the farmer is to manage his own land, but depending on decisions which are taken several thousand kilometers away, specifically in Chicago, United States, where the price of worldwide commodities are decided. So what happened is that over the course of time, the price of durum wheat progressively declined. So this farmer was not able to cope any longer with the expenses that were not declining at the same time. And so he didn't earn enough. So he decided to turn his farm into an agricultural country resort. I mean, he's using it for tourism. So he dropped from agricultural production and he decided to invest in a totally different type of land use, which is quite successful, but it's sad from the point of view of agricultural production because there is no more agriculture in this part of the land. Well, I can tell you that this situation is quite common in many hilly parts of my country, meaning that you can continue to do productive agriculture only if you diversify your farm. And organic farming and agroecological production is probably the best example to show that you can continue to farm productively in such type of situation. I think this is something important, and I will reprise this concept later on when talking about agricultural policies in Europe. But I will first quickly explain what agroecology means from the point of view of Europe. This is a paper that you probably know. It's quite a famous paper on agroecology, published in 2009 from a group of French colleagues with the inclusion of Charles Francis, which is a very important name. He's from the United States. He's an expert on sustainable agriculture. So the triple vision of agroecology as a science, a movement, and a practice is very much embedded in the agroecological vision of Europe as it is seen now. And many of the activities and endeavors around agroecology in the continent are actually based on this approach. Even though the relative importance of science, practice, and social movements is quite different depending on the European countries. So if you're interested in knowing more about this, I invite you to log on to the Agroecology Europe website, where you can find this brand new report. This is a report of an initiative carried out in 11 European countries, in which you can find a kind of mapping of the state of agroecology in those countries, of the different initiatives, and you can have a glimpse on in where which of the three components of agroecology is presently more important. There is diversity in the country, among countries also as to this. What is interesting for me to point out is that this was a work carried out by a youth network, which is present within Agroecology Europe. So I'm very happy to point this out, because there are a lot of young people that are very motivated on supporting agroecology from very different points of view. Some of them are young researchers, others are farmers, others are technicians, and every one of them is contributing a bit to the development of agroecology in the continent. So I really invite you to download this report. I will now give you a very quick overview of what has happened in the last 5 or 6 years in Europe, just to give it as an example of how agroecology is perceived and how it's developing. In 2014, France, which is an important country from the point of view of agriculture in Europe, decided to very clearly embrace agroecology, even though there are discussions because not all of the practices that they call agroecological are agreed by everyone. But nevertheless, it's a fact that the French government decided to try to change substantially the way they farm and embrace the term agroecology as a way to produce differently. And this is exactly what the logo of the initiative means, as translated from French. And very recently, in September this year, a document released by the French government called France Relance. This is a strategic document which is meant to highlight how the country should reprise from the economic crisis determined by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the chapter related to agriculture, they again mentioned agroecology as the way to go, as the type of a paradigm for agricultural and agro-industrial production to be perceived. So again, there is interest in at this level. The FAO, that as you probably know, has its headquarters in Rome, has been quite important in supporting agroecology, not just in Europe, but across different continents, with a series of meetings and regional workshops, including 2 major events in 2014 and 2018, which were organized in Rome. And they have this agroecology knowledge hub, which is very well done. So it's collecting information on different type of projects and initiatives. You can download quite a lot of reports and useful documents on the development of agroecology in different continents, including Europe. Then 2016 was the year in which we gave birth to Agroecology Europe, which is not a scientific society as somebody thinks. It's really meant to foster agroecology in all three components. So there is a scientific part, there is a part related to practices and interactions with practitioners of different kinds, and there is also a part of fostering the social movements, which are very diverse and heterogeneous across the continent, but which share the goal of fostering agroecology in the area. Later, at the end of 2018, we were able to found also the Italian Association of Agroecology, called AIDA. And from the point of view of research, what I want to point out is that just before the first lockdown at the end of February this year, a group of presently more than 30 European institutions dealing with agricultural research, including the major players like in RAI in France, JKI or ZALF in Germany, and many others, got together with the around a goal, a long-term goal of that is called Towards Zero Pesticide Production in Europe. So the idea is to foster research aimed to the gradual substitution and eventually the elimination of chemical pesticides across the country. And what is important to stress is that the European Union is very much sensitive to funding research on sustainable agriculture, including agroecology. There is a general framework, which the present one is called Horizon 2020. There is an upcoming one called Horizon Europe, where there are billions of euro available for doing this kind of research. So at least in this perspective, I think we have to be positive. Now, on a more general framework of politics in the European Union, the European Commission, which is a kind of equivalent of European government, so bringing together the 27 countries constituting the European Union, has released a so-called Green Deal. So a Green Deal is basically a manifesto, but it's not just a manifesto, it's accompanied by a series of measures to change radically the type of economy in the continent, going towards greening at different levels. So it includes agriculture, but also production of energy, transportation, industry, etc. So the idea is to restructure the type of economy at the level of the continent in order to achieve big objectives like zero net emissions by 2050 and similar kind of goals. More specifically, from the point of view of agriculture, the European Commission released two accompanying strategies. One is called the EU Biodiversity Strategy sorry, this is the old one. The new one is for 2030, and the so-called Farm to Fork strategies. And the provisions of these strategies are to allocate a substantial amount of money to help farmers and all the other actors of the food chain in Europe follow the transition towards a greener agriculture. And agroecology is mentioned as one way through which we can achieve the overall objectives of the Green Deal and of these two strategies. And there are quantitative targets that are set forth. One of the most important is that by 2030, 25% of the total European agricultural land should be grown organically. This is a very ambitious plan. So 25%, 1/4 of the continent in 10 years from now should be grown organically. So presently we are a little bit above 8%. So there is still a long way to go, but at least this is testimonying the great effort and the ambition that at the higher level of politics, sustainable agriculture has. And one of the most important practical instruments to try to achieve this goal is the CAP, which stands for Common Agricultural Policy. Basically, it are subsidies of different kinds that are given to European farmers that are willing to embrace some specific type of practices the CAP is divided into two pillars, and one of these pillars, the so-called pillar 2, has a lot of agro-environmental measures aimed to support the change towards a greener type of agriculture, reducing pesticide and fertilizer use, diversifying cropland through rotation, the use of cover crops, mulches, field margins, introduction of semi-natural habitats, and so on. So there are very different measures that could be supported by the CAP. Just to give you an idea of the amount of money which is involved in this type of activity, the CAP altogether amounts to nearly 40%, 40, of the total budget of the European Union, so the global budget, comprising all type of activities in all type of sectors. So 40% of the total budget is invested into the CAP, which is a clear sign that agriculture matters a lot, even in industrialized and economically advanced areas like Europe. And you see here around this central point the specific type of goals that are meant to be fostered through the next CAP, which is set to start in 2022. There has been recently a vote for the CAP, which was a little bit disappointing. So many of the intentions of the Green Deal were not actually captured, at least by this round of vote. There is still room for improving the CAP before it becomes final. But I think that one important element, you may have come across this paper, which was just released last week and published in Science. It's a second order meta-analysis. So basically the intention of the authors was to capture the best evidence available worldwide on the relationship between the provision of yield and the provision of other ecosystem services through agricultural diversification. Different practices aimed to soil, aimed to crop, aimed to the overall cropping and farming system. So the important information that I think could be instrumental to direct the common agricultural policy of the European Union towards a real capturing of agroecological measure is this information that worldwide, 63%, in 63% of the cases, there is a win-win situation, meaning that if you diversify your agricultural production, you can at the same time increase yield and obtain several other ecosystem services. So if you haven't read it yet, I really invite you to read this paper, because it's an excellent piece of paper from a scientific point of view, and could also be really instrumental to foster agroecology everywhere. Just to finish, some bit of information on 3 regional projects carried out in Italy. The first project is carried out and sponsored by Region Tuscany, which is the region where Pisa, the place I'm talking from today, is placed. So it's the central part of Italy. There is a project funded by the region to develop 100,000 urban gardens. And I can translate the most important piece of information from Italian, here in an explanation. So basically, the idea is to retrieve from abandonment or from other type of uses 100,000 small gardens, to allocate them for free to anyone who's interested in using them, giving priority to young people, meaning less than 40 years of age, and prioritizing organic methods for cultivating these urban areas. So this is a way to foster urban agriculture towards organic or agroecological production, but there is more than that. There is an important social objective related to this project, and that is to facilitate the exchange of information between young people and between and elderly people, which might cultivate nearby gardens. So it's also a goal to aggregate different generations around a concept and an objective of sustainable agriculture. And I think that also the social objective of this type of project is really to praise. Second case, biodistricts. So biodistricts are basically a portion of the territory in which several nearby municipalities get together around a common goal. Specifically, in this case, the goal is to produce 100% of the food organically. Here you have an example of a biodistrict which is placed in a region Lazio, so just south of Tuscany, so the region of Rome, the capital. The idea is that through organic farming, but when I mean organic farming, I mean small scale organic farming, really in line with the agroecological approach, to produce food locally, to facilitate production, consumption, sharing of knowledge, sharing of other experiences related to nature, related to arts, related to history. My country is very rich in all these elements, and sometimes we just need a kind of catalyzer to bring all this together. And this issue of biodistricts, which are developing in quite a high number of areas across the country, I think it's an interesting opportunity to eventually foster the agroecological approach to production and to the way of life. And finally, this is a new type of initiative. It's called Rich Food Communities. So basically, it's bringing together, again, different people, sometimes being part of different administrative regions, but they share the same type of land, which is mountain land. And they share a culture, historical culture of valorizing good food, valorizing nature, preserving the environments, and preserving the knowledge and the heritage, the cultural heritage around this type of food production. So there are ways and there are opportunities to support this type of aggregations in areas which are somehow remote and might be otherwise taken away from mainstream economic development. So again, these are initiatives very much in line with the agroecological approach to food and farming. So do we have a bright future ahead in Europe? I hope so. Certainly, we know already that there is resistance. Large-scale farming, at least part of them, are already fighting agroecology. To some extent, this is positive in the sense that, you know, when you fear someone, you also giving value to it, or to him or her. So agroecology in this respect is gaining pace. Certainly, it is important to stress that in Europe, there is institutional support at any level, starting from the European Commission down to the member states, and then the regions, and then the municipalities. So there is money and there is willingness to change things. It will not be linear, it will be more difficult, and it will probably take more time than we expect, but there is a lot of sensitivity from European citizens in this direction. And what is probably different, if you compare Europe with other continents, is that in much of Europe, the agroecological transition is really driven from the cities, from citizens. So they want a greener world, they want locally produced food, healthy food, and this is helping a lot farmers, not only those that are closer to the cities, to adjust and change their production system. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Professor Barberi. It's great presentations, I think. And we will continue for the next presenter. Professor Miguel Altieri.
I need you to allow me to share the screen, please.
It's okay. Okay, Prof. Okay, the next presenter is Professor Altieri. Okay, please, time is yours, Prof.
I need to be able to share the screen. So please, can you allow me to share the screen?
Prof, wait a minute. We'll try to change your already. Ready? It's okay, Prof. Please.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. Hello from California. It's 5:45 in the morning. So what I'm going to do, thank you for the invitation, and I'm going to talk about agroecological restoration of agro landscapes to achieve food sovereignty and resilience in the context of Latin America. As you know, we have two types of agriculture that are clashing. One is the industrial agriculture model that has followed the precepts of the Green Revolution. And then we have the peasant agriculture, small-scale family farmers that occupy about 20% of the land, but they produce more than 50 and 70% of the food globally. So this large-scale agriculture, which is dominated by monocultures, occupies about 80% of the agricultural land, only produces about 30% of the food, and it exerts a huge ecological footprint on the planet due to the injection of more than 5 to billion pounds of pesticides a year. And these systems, because they lack ecological heterogeneity and genetic diversity, are very vulnerable to climate change. As a matter of fact, they're one of the main engines responsible for the promotion of the COVID-19 epidemics that we're experiencing, because as monocultures encroach into natural habitats, they promote deforestation. All the wildlife here that it has been coexisting with certain viruses become in contact with cattle and human communities, transmitting several viruses. As opposed to a model of agriculture that is small scale, that is inserted many times in complex landscapes. And these systems are much more resilient and much more ecologically balanced. For example, here, and at the same time of providing ecosystem services, as Paolo was mentioning, they also provide productivity. So for example, this small farm here in Tlaxcala, Mexico, it's a system where you have corn, beans, and then in a rotation with alfalfa, but it's surrounded by a complex landscape matrix. Well, that landscape matrix not only provides ecosystem services, but it's also very productive. As you can see here, you have the field with the crops. Weeds are also eaten by the local people. But then the border provides species of fruits, about 0.64 tons per hectare, which comprises about 1/3 of the income that farmers get when they sell the produce that they produce in the fields after they have consumed for self-sufficiency at the family level. So these diversified systems that still exist in Latin America, some in the form of agroforestry systems like coffee and cacao, are very important in providing habitat for more than 200 different bird species, bats and arthropods of different kinds, but also, as I said, produces a multitude of produce, not only coffee, because the coffee is kind of a forest in which you get flowers and fungi and palms and other fruit trees. So the farmers really are managing these very complex ecosystems with a tremendous amount of knowledge, because you need to know when to prune, when to harvest, etc. And that diversity provides stability to the family, food security, as well as the services that they need for production. But the systems are becoming more and more simplified because of the demands of the market. There are certain varieties that the market is signaling, and that those are grown under very slow shade or low shade or as monocultures. And so you lose the ecological services as you start simplifying the systems, and farms become more and more dependent on external inputs, and their system become more vulnerable to climate change. So what we're talking about now is not only agroecology at the field level, but also at the landscape level. And we talk about the concept of agroecological restoration, which is the process of reestablishing the ecological relationships between crop fields and the surrounding ecosystems, with the goal of producing food as well as providing ecological services. So really, agroecological restoration is the integration of the knowledge of that agroecology has produced, not only through scientific research, but also the contribution of traditional knowledge from farmers, and landscape ecology. And landscape ecology works at the landscape level and agroecology at the farm level, but combined, they produce resilience. So with agroecology, the aim now, by including conservation biology, landscape ecological perspectives, is not only to restore the biodiversity in the farming systems, but also conserving the biodiversity and natural resources at the landscape level, which combined increases the species biodiversity, especially the functional biodiversity of agroecosystem, those that play a role in production, in pollination, and biological control and soil fertility. That leads to improved ecosystem functions, and the ecosystem services then end up in promoting plant health and soil fertility and productivity in the agroecosystem. So the elements that can be used in the restoration are multiple depending on the characteristics of the landscape. This is just, I'm sorry, this is in Spanish, but depending on where the field is, you can promote hedgerows, you can promote also reforestation in certain areas, corridors, etc., etc. So for example, this is a community in Colombia, a rural community, that the problem they had is that they had no water. And so the first thing was to restore the watershed, reforest the watershed, so that now there's water available for the families, for the animals, and for production. So once you restore the landscape in order to have the provision of water and other services, then comes the modification of the agricultural systems. At the beginning, this community was growing arracacha, which is a tuber crop, very similar to kind of a potato, that is very eroding in monoculture situations with a high dependence on external inputs, especially pesticides. And so farmers started converting the system by first introducing plants that are going to produce a lot of biomass, for example, Ricinus communis and Tithonia diversifolia, which is a composite. And then as hedgerows throughout the farm, and then started introducing coffee and other crops into the system to end up with an agro landscape like this, where you have an incredible diversity of crops with these corridors that are going to be providing fodder, but at the same time, soil fertility, habitat for pollinators and beneficial insects because these plants flower. And at the same time, you get a productivity of about 25 different crops. So, but sometimes farmers start with very degraded ecosystems like this one that you are seeing here in the highlands of Mexico, in the Oaxaca region. And the destiny of many of these farmers after high deforestation, high overgrazing, is to migrate to the United States or to the major cities of Mexico. But these farmers here decided to stay by promoting a landscape restoration approach. So the first thing they did was to restore the forest cover at the top of the mountain with a local pinus species, Pinus oaxacensis. Then started the soil conservation practices, terracing, as well as water harvesting with this canals here, which allows then the water to remain in the system because it rains only 3 months a year, and the rest of the year they need to harvest water in order to promote agricultural production. In Cuba, also there has been a lot of restoration of lands that have been abandoned or land that were under monocultures, like this example of the Casimiro family, which is a very famous family now, but they are part of a large movement of more than 120,000 farmers that follow agroecological principles. So they started with the monocultures of tobacco and corn, but then they were trained in agroecology. They transformed their farm into this 10-hectare mosaic of different types of systems, agroforestry systems, crop rotations, polyculture, surrounded by a very complex matrix of hedgerows and windbreaks that provide many, many ecological services, but also many products for the family: fodder, fuel, food, etc., fruits, and also high protection against hurricanes, which unfortunately the Caribbean and now Central America are suffering tremendous amounts of climatic events, although their contribution to climate change has been zero. The responsibles are the big countries, the industrial countries, including Europe, the United States, China. But through this design, these farmers were able to reach autonomy, not only in food security, what we call food sovereignty, but also a complete technological autonomy. That is, for example, these are the inputs of the farm from 1995 to today, and you can see they're almost zero. The system now relies on processes that are triggered by the biodiversity of the system. And at the same time, these farmers have a high productivity. They can produce enough protein per hectare to feed about 10 people, 34 people, with an energy efficiency of 30. That means they put 1 kilocalorie and they get 30 back. There is no agriculture that is more efficient than that. Industrial agriculture's efficiency is about 1.5. So this agriculture is 20 times more efficient than industrial agriculture. And the research that has been done by many of our colleagues in Latin America has shown that the systems that are more diversified, that have agroforestry systems and cover cropping and contour farming and so on, are much more resilient to climate change, especially hurricanes. For example, after Mitch, which is a horrible hurricane that happened in the 90s in Central America, you can see that the farmers that follow monoculture systems had more mudslides than the farmers that had diversified systems. The same thing in Cuba. After Ike, for example, monoculture plantations of banana and so on were totally destroyed by the hurricane, as opposed to these farms that had hedgerows, agroforestry patterns that were able to resist the impact of the hurricanes much more. So basically what we're finding is that the agroecosystem resiliency on the one side is connected to the vegetational diversity within the farm, but also the landscape matrix also that surrounds the farm can provide protection and resilience. So also in the cattle sector, there has been some interesting modifications. For example, in Colombia, these monocultures of grasses that are very vulnerable to droughts are being transformed into what is called silvopastoral systems, where you have like different layers. You have the crops, you have the grasses, then you have the leucina and other legumes or titonia as a shrub layer, and then you have a tree layer on top of the system, which creates conditions for animal welfare that are very positive, and at the same time they create a microclimate that makes the system more resilient to climate change. Also, the enrichment of organic matter of the soil with the manure of the cows also increases the water holding capacity of the soil. So this transformation of this monoculture grasslands into agroforestry silvopastoral systems increases the carrying capacity from 1 animal to 5 animals, and also increases the production of the milk of the cows in about from 1 liter to about 4.1 liters per cow per day. And this is because the animal welfare condition increases. You can see that the evapotranspiration is lower, the relative humidity and the temperature is also lower under these conditions than in open pastures, which can be very, very drastic under tropical conditions. And when you measure the productivity of the system in terms of milk production per cow, around 10 liters per cow per day, you can see that this productivity is continued and is balanced. It doesn't oscillate too much, regardless of the rainfall regime. Right now in Colombia, they're in the La Niña, which is where you have more rain. But you can see that when El Niño comes, the dry season, the productivity remains the same. In the grasslands where you don't have trees and shrubs, the productivity goes down considerably. So you can create these landscapes of agroforestry silvopastoral systems that occupy huge territories that are going to provide not only productivity, but also, as I said, ecosystem services and carbon sequestration and other services. But large-scale monocultures can also be transformed. This is in Argentina, a large-scale farm. This is the inheritance of monoculture soybean, transgenic soybean resistant to Roundup, a lot of pollution, a lot of deforestation, a lot of erosion. And this farm was transformed into a large-scale agroecological design, preserving the natural vegetation, enriching these corridors in order to provide ecosystem services, but at the same time practices within the system that would have cover cropping, intercropping, tree integration, animal integration, etc. So we can see that diversified agroecological farming can take different type of routes depending if we're working with large-scale industrial systems that also need to be actually diversified and transformed, or whether we're working with small farmers. The importance is that the agroecological principles are universal and can guide the transformation of these two systems at the farm level, at the landscape level, but the technological forms, the practices are going to be different because the contexts are also different. So just to finish here, basically this combination of agroecology and ecological landscape ecology can lead to the restoration of landscapes, agro-landscapes that are going to be resilient, that are going to be sustainable in order to produce food accessible, obviously, in a form that is harmonious with the surrounding environment, and at the same time to recover the capacity of the surrounding ecosystems of the agricultural systems to provide ecological goods and services to society. So with that, I think I did my 15 minutes, and I'm ready to engage in questions along with Professor Barberi. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Miguel. Also, it's very interesting presentations. There are several questions from the participants here, but I think it's better for participants that have questions to just raise your hand and then give your answer to each presenters. I will give a chance to the Dr. Umar first, and the second one is Pak Musofan, and another I will try to inform by myself several questions from several participants that can join with us. They just informed by YouTube. Okay, the first opportunity I will give it to the Dr. Umar. Please, Dr. Umar.
Oh, I thought that you'll read my question. Okay. So my first question to Prof. Paolo. In your okay. Okay. You mentioned about in your presentation that there are many organizations and initiative in Europe on agroecological. And my question, are they mostly supported by government or other agencies? And what are the proportion of funding scheme for conventional and organic or agroecological development?
Okay, thank you, Uma, for this question. So according to the system we have in Europe, I would say that we are lucky to be part of a European Union, which has a lot of money, meaning that the member states contribute with part of their taxation money to common goals. These allow to have funded initiatives, either regarding science. I already mentioned that agroecological research is quite popular, and it's expected to become even more popular in the next round of the framework European research program starting next year. But also from the point of view of practices, basically it works like this. There are some general objectives that are set forth by the level of the European Union. They include a series of measures like agroecological measures related, for example, to cropping system diversification, the inclusion of cover crops or mulches or hedgerows or other type of semi-natural areas, different elements related to diversification of cropping and farming system can be supported financially by the European Union budget. Then this is a general framework. Then every member state has is allocated part of the budget, and depending on how it is organized internally. So, for example, in Italy, there is a further subdivision level because the agricultural subsidies are decided and prioritized at the regional level. So we have 21 regions in the country. So every one of them has some budget coming from the European Union. They know that they have to use this budget for the overall goals set forth by the European Union, but they can adjust, they can prioritize some measures depending on local conditions. So, for example, if in some areas there is a problem, major problem in soil erosion, they could prioritize measures related to conservation agriculture through diversification, reduced tillage, and mulches, for example. Or they can prioritize the development of agroforestry systems. Agroforestry is also becoming quite popular in Europe. We are not so lucky like in tropical environments that plants grow so fast. So we have to wait a little bit longer before seeing the effect of such complex systems. But yes, what I can say generally is that there is quite a lot of support and quite a lot of money. What is important now is that the indications and the money coming from the European level is actually turned into meaningful and optimum implementation at the state level or at the regional level. So this is very much a duty of the individual member states and of the individual regions, but they cannot for sure say that we cannot do that because there is no money. There is a lot of money. For farmers, there is a lot of money really to implement also innovative activities, trying to bring farmers together, as I also explained. And of course, you can magnify the effect in terms of ecosystem service provision if you focus your activities at the level of the whole territory rather than just at the level of individual farmers. So there are a lot of opportunities. What is still unclear is up to what point there is really the full political willingness to go to the very end in terms of this support. And regarding the support to conventional farming that you mentioned, well, in terms of research, there is the major support right now is on one hand in the direction of precision agriculture, on the other hand in the support of the so-called new plant breeding technologies applied to agriculture. Considering nevertheless that in the European Union, and this is quite different compared, for example, with the United States or Latin America, there is basically only one GMO of, let's say, the classical GMOs which can be grown. So there is not, generally speaking, a very favorable political ground to support these because of the public opinion and because of the precautionary principle, which is basically a very fundamental principle in Europe, meaning that if you're not 100% sure that what you're going to implement as an innovation cannot harm, you shouldn't use it. So it's a completely opposite approach compared to, for example, the United States, and this is creating a lot of trade wars between the European Union and the US, for example. There is some support, general support also for conventional farmers, but the share of this support compared to the share of the money going in the direction of sustainable agriculture is progressively being reduced.
Thank you, Prof. Paolo. I hope there are some people from government here in this webinar, so they will think to allocate some. Maybe. Otherwise, I agree that farmers are also rich. They can, yeah, contribute to this development. And my next question actually to Prof. Miguel. Yeah, I saw many wonderful pictures in your presentation. It seemed it took like a very long time to make those design, and that's my question: how long it take, and are government also involved in this redesigning processes, and yeah, especially for the landscape scale. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I will combine the answer to Uma's question, also addressing the question of Agustina Romatin, who's asking about how to measure the impacts of the landscape restoration, agroecological restoration. Well, first of all, there's no governments involved in agroecological restoration efforts. Many of the experiences that I show you are grassroots experiences. The small farmers took things on their own hand, and they started the restoration of their farms or at the landscape level. And some of them are private initiatives. For example, those large-scale systems that I show you in Argentina, the agroforestry systems in Colombia are private farms, large-scale farms, in which the farmers have understood that a conversion to an agroecological approach will be much more beneficial to them. It's a win-win situation. They cut the cost of production in about 50%, for example. They become totally, little by little, independent from external inputs, which is a huge expense in production. And the approach that we use is basically the combination of principles of agroecology and principles of landscape ecology. When you combine those principles, then you will see that that is not very different to restore, the farm, that it makes sense to restore the watershed in addition to the farms that are located embedded in that watershed, because if you do restoration of a farm without restoring what is surrounding the farm, you can have your process is going to be much slower in terms of transition to a more sustainable system. And then we use indicators that can measure the impact. For example, you can start looking at erosion rates, for example. Are they being slowed down? The soil degradation, there are many indicators to use that. What about pollinators, presence of natural enemies, as you enrich the hedgerow, for example? So it's a matter of getting together with farmers to come up with a list of indicators that make sense to them, and then agree on the criteria on how you're going to evaluate those indicators. For example, you're going to give them a value of 1 to 5. Okay, well, what does it mean that we give 1 versus 5? For example, landscape matrix. Let's say we want to measure the richness of the landscape matrix around a farm. What are we going to measure? Are we going to measure the cover, how much of the perimeter of the farm is covered with the matrix? What is the species composition? Okay, so we need to now agree how we're going to give them a value. We give them a 5 if it's totally surrounded by a forest. That forest is diverse. Then we would give it a 5, for example. A 1 would be a farm that has no matrix at all, and things of that nature. So I think it is a very flexible approach where you measure, on the one hand, certain indicators that would allow you to see whether you are advancing or not in the agroecological restoration process. I guess that's it. There's another question there. I don't know if you want to read it.
Sorry.
That's question. Probably you can read for.
Oh, okay. Another question from Regina Praptoko.
Yeah, from Regina.
Yeah, dear Prof. Miguel, some agricultural industries already providing their own silvopastoral system, such as cattle, sheep, or buffalo, to carry out restoration according to their schedule? And if so, do they recycle post-harvest residue into animal feeds?
Well, the silvopastoral systems are becoming more and more popular in different parts of Latin America. Not only are they based on cattle, they also include sheep. Buffalo, we don't have too much, although there are some areas where they have buffalo. And and so there is obviously there's no residues because the silvopastoral systems don't have annual crops. So there's no residues of annual crops that can be fed back to the animals. However, if you have a grassland and a crop system, then obviously you can use the residues of the crops to feed the animals. In silvopastoral system, you have grasses and you have shrubs and you have trees, and the animals feed on the grass and the shrubs. So they're constantly recycling the biomass in the system back to the system, to the soil through manure.
Yeah, and sometimes the farmers also cut the trees, I mean the leaves on the trees, and also fed to the animal.
Exactly.
Yeah, like in the system in my farm, we use these trees also to be fed to the goats and others. And
another question from Pak Musofan, maybe.
Yeah, please, Pak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hagus. This is the question from YouTube from Mr. Rudy Arif Satrio. He has two questions. One question to address to Mr. Altieri and one question to address to Mr. Barberi. The question for Mr. Altieri: what is the positive impact of diversity agriculture for the ecosystem, climate change, and also for the resilience of landscape? Another question addressed to Mr. Barberi: what is the path of agriculture plan for the future? Is it really different from present agriculture system and type? Thank you.
Why don't you go ahead first, Paolo?
Okay, Miguel, hi, by the way. Nice to see you. And that's a kind of $100 million question, but I will say that, well, I agree with what Professor Altieri said before. I mean, there is not just one single pathway that all the farmers in all parts of the world should follow to undergo the transition. So it's important, first of all, to understand, and I think there is increasing awareness as to this, that we need to change. I mean, in terms of production system, but in terms of food systems, this is not sustainable anymore. And it's not just an issue related to overly use of fertilizer or pesticide or pollution. It's very much a question, an economic question in terms of giving farmers the right recognition for their work. And this is, I think, is a common point across all type of farming systems in industrialized countries as well as in developing countries or across continents. I give you an example of why, for example, organic farming, agroecological farming is becoming popular among farmers in Europe. Farmers that are too close to the industrial food chain systems, like, for example, farmers that are delivering their food to supermarket chains, which is the major way European consumers buy their food, they are becoming more and more squeezed from the point of view of the price they get from their produce by contracts which are only defined by the supermarkets or the food industry. So there is no incentive or no reward for doing better in terms of farming practices, because at the end, whether or not you're going to earn enough will be decided by somebody else. So you have no autonomy in deciding your own future. So this is an issue which is very much related to the food sovereignty issue in a different form compared to what is present, what this means in Africa or Latin America, but it's still related to food sovereignty. So through the reorganization of food systems into agroecological production, valorizing short supply chains, and becoming yourself, together with your peers, the main actor of the renaissance of the food system, eventually also being able to decide what will be your destiny in terms of earning enough. And this is something that agroecology can allow in every part of the world. So through empowering farmers and empowering people and all actors across the food chain. So farmers, even in industrialized countries, are becoming more and more aware of these. And this also applies to some organic farmers. I know that Miguel is very sensitive to the discussion comparing industrialized organic agriculture versus agroecological type of organic agriculture, and is absolutely correct. So many of the so-called industrialized organic farmers or conventionalized organic farmers are falling into the same bottleneck that conventional farmers have followed before them. And they are becoming aware that there should be another way, and they need to find another way to organize their production. So that's why agroecology in Europe is becoming popular among farmers. And of course, the issue is quite complex and diversified, and there is no single solution or no single that can apply to any context. But what I found interesting is to see a parallel or very similar situation comparing two areas that are apparently very different, like Europe or Africa. I've had some experience of working in Africa in several contexts. And the basic problems of all farmers across the world are the same. They manifest themselves in different perspectives, but it is through diversification, and diversification also means diversifying the different channels through which you are selling your food. That's why revitalizing short supply chain is so important as a way to ensure stability and resilience also from the economic point of view, besides the environmental point of view. I think this is a key point that, if understood across the globe, could really mean a lot in terms of fostering the transition. And as I said, the pathways will be different, but the goal is obvious, and it has to be common, I think.
So my question, it looks like he's asking about, Musafan is asking about what is the positive impact of diversity of agriculture for the ecosystem, climate change. I think we have made the point, and there's a tremendous amount of literature showing that as you increase the diversity of farming systems, especially functional biodiversity, your systems are going to become more resilient to pests, to diseases, to weeds, to climate change. And this can be extended to the land, if we extend it to the landscape level, where we also enrich the matrix, the landscape matrix surrounding farms, the system will be much more resilient, even more. And another question here by Bernard, Bernard says, maybe you share more about how to organize small-scale farmers to practice more sustainable agriculture and how to get enough support from the government. The way it works in Latin America, there are many mechanisms in which all this information is being spread. But one of the dominant pathways is called campesino a campesino, which is a horizontal methodology, pedagogy, where farmers get exchange ideas and practices through different methods, pedagogical methods. And the governments, the way to gain support, on the one hand, is more at the municipal level, regional level. Sometimes there are, in Latin America, there's a lot of decentralization. So for example, in a municipality, you can have a mayor that is supportive of those practices, of that transformation. Sometimes agroecological farmers become mayors because they're supported by the local people, and then they try to promote that transformation. But I think that we cannot put the weight of the change of agriculture policies only on the farmers. The consumers are very, very important. And today with the COVID-19, I think we have the opportunity, because people have realized that depending on this global food chain is very, very vulnerable when you have a crisis like COVID, when you have lockdowns and so on, and that the local food systems gain priority, where people can have access to fresh food and to accessible food is by putting production in the hands of small farmers and even in urban agriculture. So I think that COVID-19 is providing an opportunity for consumers to become aware that eating is an ecological and political act, that every time you support the small farmers, the local food chains, you're promoting resiliency and sustainability at the local level. And when you support the large-scale farms, the large supermarkets, you are really making the community more susceptible, more vulnerable to lockdowns that are going to become more and more frequent if we don't change the way we're treating nature. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Miguel and Professor Barberi. It's very interesting discussions, but we have not enough time to discuss more. But I think we already have your email and a contact. Maybe if we have some question that not yet answered by all of you, we will send it to your email, and then hopefully you can also provide answer for each questions. Okay, Professor Barberi and also Professor Altieri, this is in the end of our discussions. But before that, I will try to just make very short conclusions for all of you. The first one, as Professor Paolo Barberi mentioned, that in Europe, we know that now this is the new information for us, for Indonesian people, that in Europe now you mentioned that already have Green Deal. The Green Deal is very, very strong, I think, because this is such kind of a policy that can press the government in each countries in Europe that can they should conduct and support the organic agriculture in countries in Europe, and it already done in several districts in Italy. And the priority of this project also mentioned by you, that young people that have age less than 40 years will be the target in these activities, and also organic agriculture will be the most priority for these things. And another from Professor Miguel Altieri mentioned about how we can create agroecology and also landscape ecology. As you mentioned before, is agroecological restoration should be conducted by two sides. The first one is agroecology, the second one is landscape ecology. Both can provide farm biodiversity and also landscape biodiversity. And synergism between farm biodiversity and landscape biodiversity can produce resiliency to the agroecology, agro-ecosystem. As you mentioned before, resiliency can be shown by the pest reduction, and climate stability, and etc. And finally, we can provide sustainable agriculture and also resiliency in our agro-ecosystem. And that's all, I think. Thank you so much for your good presentation, Professor Barberi and also Professor Altieri. And hopefully we can do the same things, not only in this year, but also in the next year. Okay, thank you so much for all of you. And I give back time to Mbak Dian. This time yours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hagus, for the presentation sessions. And thank you for all the speakers and also moderator for the amazing presentation sessions. And I would like to say thank you so much for the participant for the amazing questions during the presentation sessions. So the end of the second session means that we are near to the end of the webinar today. But before, we will have the special closing remarks from our Vice Dean of Financial Resources Management, Mr. Mangku Purnomo. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Mangku Purnomo.
Okay, thank you everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Miguel, Professor Paolo, and Professor Jos, and also for all of the this international symposium or international guest lectures on the hard work until on the near to midnight in Indonesia, of course. We are already midnight, and that we know that we are all of our life is changing. We're moving from the footprint to the landscape. We're moving from the local governance today to the global governance. And we're not only talking about resources anymore, but we're also talking about the political ecology, about the environment, about the climate change, that we should find what the future, our agriculture, that can support our life on the future. This is the big concern, I think, in our faculty and in our university, just to give contribution to the future. And this night is quite fruitful discussions, and thank you for all of the people who joined on this seminars, and thank you. Good night and assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mangku Purnomo, for the closing remarks. And we actually have one more additional agenda for today. Take the photo sessions together with all the keynote speakers and also the participants. So I will invite all of you to turn on your camera so we can take a photo together. Okay.
Photo, yeah?
Yes, are we ready to take the photo? Yes, okay. So
yeah, this is the standard procedure.
And maybe we can give
for
a little.
All, please open
the camera. Maybe we can
open with the camera.
Draw a little smile to cherish the night today. So I will count to 3. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Okay, once again. Okay, I will count 1.
Freestyle.
2, freestyle. Okay. Maybe we can do freestyles together. Okay, I will count 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much for all the speakers and also participants.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys.
Okay, finally, we are at the end of the webinar today. And thank you so much once again to all the honorable keynote speakers and also participants. On behalf of the committee, we hope that today's webinar will enrich you with new knowledges and also positive perspectives, especially in agroecological landscape transformations. And once again, thank you so much for your kind attentions. And I'd like to inform you and remind you that the materials and also our certificate will be distributed through the email. And thank you so much for the kind attention. See you again next time. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening.
Okay, thank you so much. Waalaikumsalam. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah.